Hello, and welcome back to Spin Cycle Live. I'm your host, Nathan Hale. We're back once again. Today is Wednesday, April 16th, 2025. And boy, do we have a lot to cover in today's show. But how are you doing? I hope you all are doing so good. It's a beautiful day outside today, I gotta say. And boy, do we have a lot to discuss from the news cycle from today. So, before we get started, you might have noticed we've started to rerun the same show twice every week. So this show, if you've missed it, it's going to be streaming again live tomorrow night. I think we're putting them up at 8 p.m. Eastern time. So be on the lookout for those if you want to watch the show again. You missed it. Though the reruns are only going up on X, though. So you're not going to see them on YouTube or Instagram or Rumble. You're only going to see them on X. So trying to get some more viewership for the show, get more people engaged with it. So that's what's happening there. But yeah. I mean, I guess we should get right into it. We have a lot to discuss, from the UK Supreme Court ruling on biological women, Social Security fraud, artificial intelligence taking over our lives, and autism. So without further ado, I guess we should get right into it with our first story of the week. So this comes from the BBC. Supreme Court backs biological definition of women. So it's from the UK. Judges at the UK Supreme Court have unanimously ruled that a woman is defined by biological sex under equalities law. It marks the culmination of a long-running legal battle, which could have major implications for how sex-based rights apply across Scotland, England, and Wales. The court sided with campaign group For Women Scotland, which brought a case against the Scottish government, arguing that sex-based protections should only apply to people that are born female. Judge Lord Hogg said the ruling should not be seen as a triumph of one side over the other, and stressed that the law still gives protection against discrimination to transgender people. The Scottish government argued in court that transgender people with a gender-recognized certificate, a GRC, are entitled to the same sex-based protections as biological women. The Supreme Court was asked to decide on the proper interpretation of the 2010 Equality Act, which applies across Britain. Lord Hogg said the central question was how the words women and sex are defined in the legislation. He told the court, quote, "The unanimous decision of this court is that the terms women and sex in the Equality Act of 2010 refer to a biological woman and biological sex. But we counsel against reading this judgment as a triumph of one or more groups in our society at the expense of another." He added that the legislation gives transgender people, quote, protection not only against discrimination through the protected characteristics of gender reassignment, but also against direct discrimination, indirect discrimination, and harassment in substance in their acquired gender. Campaigners who brought the case against the Scottish government hugged each other and punched the air as they left the courtroom, with several of them in tears. Blah, 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 blah. Judges at the Supreme Court in London were asked to rule on what the law means by sex, whether it means biological sex or legal certified sex as defined in the 2004 Gender Recognition Act. The Scottish government argued the 2004 legislation was clear that obtaining a GRC amounts to a change of sex for all purposes. For Women Scotland argued for a common sense interpretation of the words man and women, telling the court that sex is immutable biological state. So this is great. This is great. There's a lot to the story. You can go on and keep reading it. I think that J.K. Rowling is probably mentioned in there somewhere. But this is great. You know, the UK is kind of cuckoo for Cuckoo Puffs with a lot of things that are happening right now, especially when it comes to freedom of speech. It's definitely under attack over in Europe right now, as you know, J.D. Vance kind of told us it was several months ago. But this is really great progress and a win for women. And I think this goes back to what women have been asking for and what we have been asking for as conservatives for years at this point, which is, hey, we also aren't in favor of discriminating against transgender people, right? I believe that you should be able to live your life the way that you want to. If you want to be transgender, you should be able to live through society doing that. And that's the way you want to present yourself to the world. That's great. Go live your life. Just don't force it down my throat or force my speech to reflect that if I don't want it to, right? And additionally, don't invade women's spaces, right? If you're a man with a penis, you should not be in the women's locker room. It's just as simple as that. And I think a lot of trans people have pushed back on that notion, said, hey, well, would you be comfortable with someone who looks just like a woman or just like a man changing that in their biological sex changing room? Like, take Blair White, for example. Blair White, for all intents and purposes, looks like a female, right? If you were walking on the street, you wouldn't necessarily look twice and say, hey, that's not a woman, right? So would you feel comfortable with her being in the men's locker room? And I mean, the answer to that is a very tough one. And ultimately, it has a lot to do with if you can pass or not as a trans man or a trans woman to be able to go into those spaces and the energy that you have going in there, right? If you're one of these people who's like, oh yeah, I'm going to go in as someone who clearly has a beard into the women's room and right on the inside of stall that a trans woman peed here and you survived. That's male energy right there. That is not female energy if we're getting right down to it. So it has a lot to do with that. But we can't legislate on if you pass or not, because what defines passing, right, as a man or a woman, right? We can't legislate on that. And it's the woke left that has gone so extreme and pushed us in this direction. Now we have to legislate and have these Supreme Court rulings on who's protected by who. And ultimately, it damages the people who do pass as a man or a woman from just living their lives as they were, because they weren't hurting anyone. They were not, cuckoo for cuckoo puffs or anything, going out here and trying to invade women's or men's spaces. They were just trying to live their lives. But it's the crazed people on the left that have pushed us to the point that we have to put these things in place, that now ultimately means that now we are invading on people's right to live their lives the way they want to, because it was pushed so hard in one direction that now we need to have these protections in place. You took advantage too much, and now we have to have this legislation. We have to make these court rulings. We have to say what defines a woman and a man and what protections they have based on their biological sex, right? And it's sad to see that's turned into that, because when it comes down to it, I don't have an issue if you are a biological woman who presents as a man who wants to use the men's room. When it really comes down to it, I really don't. I don't have an issue with it. It's when you want to go and cause harm, or you push it down people's throats, or you don't have that energy to be in that space, that suddenly it becomes an issue, right? If you're a man who has a full beard walking into the women's locker room where there are women and young girls changing in there, that's not okay. That's not an okay thing to do. And the left has tried to say that that is an okay thing to do. That's just wrong. That's simply wrong in every sense of the word. So this is a great win from the Supreme Court of England, of the UK. I hope to see more things like this happening. It's great that they're ruling on this, and it went in the favor that we want to have. But that's all I gotta say about that. I could go down the rabbit hole of talking about gender ideology and how pissed off I am with how it's been used to the advantage of crazed individuals. But I digress, and I'll save you the trouble. So let's get right into our next story. So this comes from the Daily Signal. White House prepares to go after non-citizens who defraud entitled programs. The White House announced Tuesday plans to help protect Social Security benefits from non-citizens and ramp up anti-fraud efforts. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt outlined key points from the memorandum to reporters at a press briefing Tuesday afternoon. Through the memorandum, President Donald Trump aims to stop non-citizens and other ineligible people from obtaining Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid benefits, in part by expanding fraud prosecution efforts across the country. Quote, the memorandum will expand the Social Security Administration's fraud prosecutor programs to at least 50 U.S. attorneys' offices and establishes a Medicare and Medicaid fraud prosecution program in 15 U.S. attorneys' offices, Levitt said. The Social Security Administration's Inspector General will also be required to audit earnings reports from people aged 100 and older whose records have shown conflicting information to fight identity theft. The memorandum also directs the Social Security Administration to look into reinstating the use of civil monetary penalties against individuals who engage in Social Security fraud in an effort that has been paused for several years, Levitt said. So this is great. This is great. We need to make sure that fraud is not happening. Any amount of fraud that is happening in the U.S. government is wrong. We need to be taking our tax dollars more seriously as Americans. That I feel as if the left has taken the perspective, and many Democrats that I've at least have spoken to have taken the perspective that, hey, this is the government's money and it's just government fraud, right? It's just government fraud. It's not that big of a deal, but it is a big deal. This is your tax money that is being put in place to go after, that's being used by criminals for their own gains, right? Social Security is in place for specific reasons. I have disagreements with the program itself, but I digress. But we cannot allow fraud of any sort, of any amount, to happen within the government. Any amount of fraud degrades our trust in the government. We should be able to trust the US government, right? If you are living in a free, fair, democratic republic like we do in the United States, we should be able to trust the government on whatever it is coming out of them. We should have enough faith in the government that the words that are being spoken from them, the programs that are in place, are accurate, are being executed fairly, and are not allowing corruption and fraud to run rampant. If there's even one person who's stealing money from Social Security, that's one too many, in my opinion. That's one too many. These are the Americans' tax dollars. The government needs to be accountable to us. This is our money that they're spending. This is our money that is then being given to people who are in retirement right now. It's my money, right? I have a paycheck. They take money out of my paycheck. I get taxed for it. They take money that I've earned. They take it from me and they go and spend it on Social Security for other people, right? Do not forget, the money you pay in Social Security does not go to you. It goes to people who are currently drawing from the system right now. And it's not even enough to cover them. So this is great. I'm happy that they are going after fraud. This is a good thing that we need to have. We need to have more accountability in the government. I should not have any doubt that there is fraud that is happening with Social Security. And the numbers that I have seen coming out from what Doge has released, from what I've seen from other sources, are staggering, to say the least. So I'm glad to see that they are starting to go after this. And additionally, if there is fraud happening, we need to know where it's happening. Is it happening on people who are currently alive? Is it people who are dead? Where's the fraud happening from? That's what I'd really like to know. Because ultimately, then you start to say, hey, are we stealing money from people who are old, who need this to live, who are currently retired? And because they're old, they're living in a nursing home, for instance, they might not be there mentally to be able to cover all this stuff. Maybe they don't have kids who are as on top of this as it should be, and they're having money stolen from them. They don't even know it, right? And that's even more wrong, right? You're stealing from people who can't defend themselves at that point, right? So it's all very wrong, and I'm glad to see that the government is going after it. I'm glad to see we have some more accountability happening within the Fed. So good job, Trump administration. Love to see it. All right. So this next story comes from Fox News. White House quietly floats millionaire tax hike proposal in Congress as GOP leaders signal opposition. Oh my God, this kind of sounds like tax the rich guys. White House aides are quietly floating a proposal within the House GOP that would raise the tax rate for people making more than $1 million to 40%. By the way, I think it's like 37% right now, so it's only a few extra points, but I digress. Two sources familiar with discussions told Fox News Digital to offset the cost of eliminating taxes on overtime pay, tipping wages, and retirees' Social Security. The sources stressed the discussions were only preliminary and the plan is one of many being talked about as congressional Republicans work to advance President Donald Trump's agenda via the budget reconciliation process. Trump and his White House have not yet taken a position on the matter, but the idea is being looked at by his aides and staff on Capitol Hill. Meanwhile, House GOP leaders, including Speaker Mike Johnson, have publicly opposed the idea of any tax hikes. Quote, I'm not a big fan of doing that. I mean, we're the Republican Party and we are for tax reduction for everyone, Johnson said on Sunday Morning Futures. One GOP lawmaker asked about the proposal and granted anonymity to speak candidly, said they would be open to supporting it, but preferred a higher starting point than $1 million. They said the reaction was mixed among other House Republicans, but not all House GOP lawmakers are privy to the discussions, and it's not immediately clear how wide the proposal has been circulated. Nevertheless, it signals that Republicans are deeply divided on how to go about enacting Trump's tax agenda. Ending Trump's 2017 Tax Cuts and Job Act, TCJA, and enacting his new tax proposals is a cornerstone of Republicans' plans for the budget reconciliation process. By lowering the Senate's threshold for passage from 60 to 51, it allows the party in power to skirt opposition to pass a sweeping piece of legislation advancing its own priorities, provided the measures deal with tax, spending, and national debt. Extending Trump's tax cuts is expected to cost trillions of dollars alone, but even if Republicans use a budgetary calculation to hide its costs, known as current policy baseline, they will still have to find a path forward for new policies eliminating taxes on tips, overtime pay, and retirees' Social Security checks. Hiking taxes on the ultra-wealthy could also serve to put Democrats in a tricky political situation, forcing them to choose between supporting Trump's policies and opposing an idea they pushed for years. The top income tax rate is currently about 37% on the $609,000 in earnings for a single person or $730,000 for married couples. But raising the rate for millionaires could be one way to pay for Trump's new tax policies. So the House Freedom Caucus chairman, Andy Harris, who is from Maryland, one of the de facto hawks leading the charge to ensure new spending is paired with deep cuts elsewhere, said that's one possibility. Quote, what I'd like to do is actually like to find spending reductions elsewhere in the budget, but if we can't get enough spending reductions, we're going to have to pay out our tax cuts, Harris told Morning with Maria last week. All right. Here's my feeling on the matter. I think the federal government already taxes people way too much as it is. I think that we have way too many government programs that are wasting taxpayer money on it. And we're giving too much money away to the Fed. On top of that, I don't like the fact that states are getting money from the federal government. It seems like we're just reallocating, socializing our tax system. I'm not a fan of that. So if you don't know right now, a lot of states get money from the federal government for various different programs, right? So smaller states that can't get enough from their income taxes and property taxes and stuff from their state because they want to have low tax rates for the people living there. They're getting money from the federal government to help cover their essential government programs and spend on other things. I'm not a fan of that. I would much rather have a higher tax rate in the state and have a much lower tax rate in the federal government. I would much rather see a reverse of that, where I'm paying more local and state taxes and much, much lower federal taxes to help cover a lot of those things in the state. I don't think states should be getting money from the federal government. I think it's a waste of it. I think there's a lot of waste in the federal government right now, especially when it comes to a lot of these entitlement programs, how much money we're spending on them and how inefficient they run. But I digress. Taxing the rich, though, I don't see why. It's not the solution. It's not the solution. Because yeah, it's exactly what Speaker Johnson said, where we're supposed to be the party of tax cuts. We're supposed to be the party of lower taxes. We're supposed to be the party of smart spending. I think that we haven't cut enough from the federal government yet. I think that's just as it is. I think that if we're talking about raising taxes, we have not cut enough from the federal government. And it's because nobody wants to take accountability for going after things like Social Security and Medicare and Medicaid and figuring out how we can rework these programs to cost less money from us as Americans and save. The federal budget right now, the vast majority of our tax money goes to paying Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, and defense. Those four things alone basically make up the entire federal budget. Every other department is irrelevant compared to those four big things. And if we cannot get that spending under control, that behemoth, there's nothing we could possibly do. There's no amount that we could raise our taxes to that would even begin to start to cover that. And on top of that, pay off our debt. There's nothing we can do about it. We have to get those programs under control before we can even consider looking at a lot of these other programs and paying down things like debt and getting our spending under control. So I totally agree with what those members were saying, where, hey, if we're even going to consider raising taxes, that better be paired with massive spending cuts across the board. So many things need to be slashed if we're even going to be again talking about raising taxes. Glad to see we're not talking about raising taxes in the middle class. If anyone should have their taxes raised, I mean, let's be honest here, it should be the people who are making the most money in the country. It's just a fact of the matter how it is. There's nothing that, I mean, if you're going to raise taxes on anyone, who would you want it to be? I don't want it to be anybody. But if you had to pick one income group, who's it going to be? It's going to be the richest people in the country, right? So it'll be interesting to see. The reason why I'm weary of raising taxes is simply because when you raise taxes on rich people, they find a way to get around it. I mean, we have so many tax loopholes in this country. We have so many ways of moving money around so that people are taxed less. I mean, I don't really even know if that's going to do all that much. So we'll see. We'll be sure to keep you updated on the matter and where we're at. So that's all I got to say about that one. So let's talk about autism now. All right, autism. What a great subject, autism. Really uplifting. So this comes from Reuters. So autism rates in the U.S. children hit record levels in 2022, CDC data shows. Rates of autism spectrum disorder among U.S. children reached a record level in 2022, continuing a recent trend of increasing prevalence, according to data released on Tuesday by the U.S. Center for Disease Control and Prevention. At 16 monitoring sites in 14 U.S. states and Puerto Rico, prevalence of the disorder among 8-year-olds in 2022 was 32.2 per 1,000, or 1 in every 31. That was up from 1 in 36 in 2020 and 1 in 44 in 2018. So between 2018 and 2022, 4 years, it's gone from 1 in 44 to 1 in 31. So it's, there are over 10 more children per 1,000 children that have autism now compared to 6 years ago, right? And it's probably even raised more now. This is 2022, we're in 2025 now, right? Rates range from about 1 in 103 8-year-olds being diagnosed in one South Texas county to 1 in every 21 in a suburban county near Philadelphia and roughly 1 in 19 near San Diego. California. So tell me, why is it 1 in 103 in South Texas, but 1 in 19 in San Diego, California? Um, it'd be interesting to know. I haven't read the full study to really get into their methodology and everything of how they've assumed that, of how they've gotten those numbers. But I assume that they've accounted for population changes. So obviously, there's more people in San Diego than there's in South Texas. So one of the researchers said, quote, "The problem is there's not a lot of research that gives a strong indication of what is driving the rise." So I think that's interesting. And that kind of leads me into the kind of the companion story to this, which is about RK Jr. is setting up a task force to find what the cause of autism is, and they're going to have results by September. So from the BBC, so keep following me, we'll talk about it in a minute. So the U.S. Health Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. has pledged a massive testing and research effort to determine the cause of autism in the next 5 months. So, quote, "By September, we will know what has caused the autism epidemic and will be able to eliminate those exposures," Kennedy said. So this is all great. This is all great. You know, the rise of autism in the United States has been staggering. It really has been staggering. People have speculated it's the vaccines. People have speculated it's other things. I speculate it's a handful of different things. When it comes down to it, the vaccine schedule for children has, I mean, it's massively expanded in the past few decades compared to where it was in like the 1960s, 70s, and 80s, right? And that's for, you know, handfuls of reasons, right? You can talk to doctors about all of that. But it's interesting that autism rates have increased over that time than they were back then. And people also say that, hey, you know, we're better at detecting what autism is and understanding, you know, who actually has it and who doesn't compared to, you know, decades ago, which I totally understand. I agree with all that. I think it has a lot of things. I think one of them is exposure to screens early on in age. I think another could be our food supply of what we're eating, because we're not seeing the same rates of autism happening across the world. But Americans by far eat the worst compared to a lot of countries out there. I mean, I think another one could simply be like environments that people are living in. We have more toxins in the air than we did before. We're surrounded by more toxins than before. It's going to be interesting to see what RFK ends up coming up with in September, to see if we can shed some light on actually what's going on with all this and how we can turn this around. You know, a lot of people have taken the perspective that there's nothing wrong with having autism. There's nothing bad about it, which I understand, right? If you have, there's nothing wrong if you have autism necessarily, but answer me this: when it comes down to it, are you living a better life if you have autism or not? I would argue that in almost every situation, you're living a better life if you don't have autism. And we should be more motivated to find out what the actual cause of this is. And the left is panicking that we're even considering investigating this, when in reality, I mean, we had this report, this researcher said, hey, we don't know what's causing this. We don't know what's driving this strong rise. This is a big deal. It's a big deal. I mean, it could be any number of things. It could be a mixture of all that. It's going to be really fascinating to see what RFK ends up coming up with. And if that's verifiable, I'm assuming that if they're releasing reports from HHS, I'm assuming that it's reliable, judging by, you know, the people who are running it right now. But it's going to be interesting to see. And we need to know what's causing this so we can turn this ship around and stop this from happening. Because if we can prove, hey, our food supply that we're eating is directly tied to autism, that'll be a whole lot of motivation to really get our food supply under control and really clean up what we're feeding our citizens. Because right now I feel like we don't have that fire to really clean up things like our food supply. And it's because I feel like we don't have enough people screaming at the top of their lungs, like I have been on the show, about how awful our food is. Not to get into the whole food argument, but I'm just saying hypothetically, if it's tied to autism, now all of a sudden we have a lot of leverage to say, hey, now we really have to clean up our food supply. It's tied to autism. The food that we eat is directly tied to this disorder, right? So That's all I gotta say about that. It's gonna be interesting to see. I think it's staggering how many people we have now, how many young people we have who are getting diagnosed with autism now. I'm sure it's even higher than what it is in this article because these are 2022 numbers. If it's any indication of where we've been even from 2018, it's gone up largely. And it's striking to see, and it's disheartening to know that we have so many young people in this country who are having to live a more challenging life now because their brain works differently than other people's does, and not always for the better. So that's all I gotta say about that. Let's move on to our last story of the week. This comes from AP News. Don't like a columnist's opinion? Los Angeles Times offers an AI-generated opposing viewpoint. In a colorful commentary for the Los Angeles Times, Matt K. Lewis argued that callousness is a central feature of the second Trump administration, particularly its policies of deportation and bureaucracy cutbacks. Quote, once you normalize cruelty, Lewis concluded in one piece, quote, the hammer eventually swings for everyone, even the ones who thought they were swinging it. Lewis's word wasn't the last, however, as they have with opinion pieces the past several weeks. Times Online readers had the option to click on a button labeled Insights, which judged the column politically as center left, and it offers an AI-generated synopsis, a Cliff Notes version of the column, and a similarly produced opposing viewpoint. One dissenting argument reads, quote, the restricting birthright citizenship and refugees admission is framed as correcting alleged exploitation of immigration loopholes, with proponents arguing these steps protect American workers and resources. So the Los Angeles Times is allowing you to have your opinions made up now by a robot. The fact that this is happening, I think, is really scary for Americans. It really puts into perspective how dumb we've gotten as a society by the fact that we now need AI to tell us what opinion we should have of a news article and to know what the opposite opinion should be of that. And it's not even a good opposing opinion, right? Use your brain a little bit more when you're reading some of these articles. If you are a smart individual, and every American, in my opinion, should be able to discern basic facts such as where something falls on a political spectrum and what one side or another truly believes at its core. We should be able to deduce when we're reading something if the writer of it is coming from a conservative perspective, from a progressive perspective, from a liberal perspective, from a classic liberal perspective, from a leftist perspective, from a woke right perspective. We should know. We should be able to discern through that ourselves, right? If we can't do that, we can't do anything, right? We're being coddled to the point now to think, hey, if I don't agree with this article, let me just have AI tell me what I should believe, right? I don't agree with whatever this article is saying. AI, tell me what I should believe, right? Let me put it in there and see what AI thinks. Let me see what the robot thinks, and that'll be how I make my opinion on something, right? The ancient Greek philosophers that built Western democracy, that created this society, that we have open debate, that we have free speech, that we have the ability to consent to be governed. These powerheads of philosophy, of knowledge, of thought would look at something like this and be truly ashamed. The fact that we have people who are reading articles who can't make up their own opinion, they have to have AI not only tell them what it's about, but generate an opposing viewpoint for them. First off, how divided are we at this point that this is what we've gotten to? That we can't even concede to one side's opinion or rationalize or understand where they're coming from? That we are so averse to listening to one side of an argument, and this goes for Republicans and Democrats, by the way, that we need to have AI tell us what our opinion should be, right? If I'm reading an article, I'm like, oh, well, this was written by a leftist. I need to know what the opposite side actually is, and that'll be what I think, because I disagree with whatever this is, so I agree with whatever the opposite is, right? We've gotten to the point that I feel like we've become so polarized that we believe the polar opposite of whatever one side is on, right? And ultimately, the answer to many of these solutions is right in the center, right? It's not an extreme left or an extreme right. It's in the center. It's culminating together and putting our ideas together to come up with a common sense understanding of how we should actually behave, right? Take the autism issue, for instance, right? The left has taken the perspective that there is nothing wrong happening in our country. There is nothing wrong with our food supply. The vaccine schedules we're giving to children, there is nothing wrong with that. That we should continue to even push harder, right? We should not be having we should continue to be serving these foods to our citizens, these hyper processed foods filled with awful ingredients to our kids, right? The obesity problem in America is not an issue. If you're too fat and you don't like it, just take some Ozempic and you'll lose the weight, right? Take a drug. If you feel bad and you're unhappy, just take a drug and you'll feel better. If you have depression, just take a drug. If you have an issue, take another drug, right? If you have any of these issues, just take the drug. Just listen to what we have. This is the hyper left perspective that no. We're not going to find the root cause of autism for many reasons, by the way. We're not going to find the root cause of autism because it's okay. It's okay. That's not an issue, right? It's not an issue for anyone. Just take a drug. Just mask the symptoms of your autistic behavior. It's not an issue. And the right's perspective is so extreme of, oh my God, the vaccines are causing all of the autism in America. We need to stop taking vaccines, period. Nobody should be. That's the other extreme. When in reality, the middle of the road issue is, hey, what RFK is doing. Let's find out what is actually causing autism in this country and move forward from there. That's the middle of the road issue, right? But all of our viewpoints have come from whatever the polar opposite is. And if we continue to listen to AI, we're going to lose that critical thinking part of our brains to be able to discern, one, what is actually a fact. Because AI is wrong about 20% of the time when it really comes down to it. So how do we even know that if it's telling us something, it's even true, right? We need to strengthen the critical thinking parts of our brain. Not enough Americans can think critically at this point. We're reading these articles. We have no idea what we're reading. We have no idea what we're talking about. We're trusting that the news media is telling us the truth. And that's why so many people have gotten caught up in what the woke left is saying, is because we've lost that critical thinking part of our brain, that we're just listening to whatever authority, such as the AP, has to say about an issue and not having any thought or opinion about it at all. That's why on this show, when we cover a story, I talk about it more in detail when we're done reading it. We're not just reading the news, we're having a discussion about what's actually happening. And that's why we cover stories from the left and the right on here, is so that you start to build up that critical thinking part of your brain and you start to think a little bit more, or you have your eyes open a little bit more to what one side or another actually thinks about an issue. Or we can criticize people like the Los Angeles Times for putting AI integration into their news outlets, right? If you are not intelligent enough to be able to discern what a fact is, to be able to build your own opinion after reading a news article, you should not be reading the news. You need to go and get yourself educated on the issues and come back to me later then, right? And on top of that, here's the worst thing that's going to happen, right? You're going to have all these people who are going to be reading the news. They're going to be they're getting their opinions based on what a computer is telling them. Now they're going to go and start arguing whatever that opinion is. They have no idea what they're talking about. I mean, just go and look at one video from Charlie Kirk debating college students. They have no idea what they're talking about. And it's because they're getting their news from outlets that are not telling them the truth, or not telling them the whole truth, or they're hearing what a computer has to tell them about things. And they're not actually going out and reading the data. They're not actually going and taking the time to really digest and understand what the actual topic or the issue is. They're just listening to what other people have to say about it. And that's truly detrimental, I think, to our society and how we're going to continue to function as a free and fair republic. If people just completely lose that part of their brain, they can't discern an opinion of their own anymore. We're just so reliant on other people's opinions. It's so wrong. It's so wrong. You need to have your own opinions about things. You need to be opinionated. You need to know what's going on. If you don't understand something, you should go and try and learn it the best you can. If you're reading an article and you don't know what word is, go and look it up yourself, right? Go look it up. Go understand what that word is. You'll learn something new. Oh gosh. But I need to cut myself off at this point. I'm going to continue to rant on about how awful this is, in my opinion. I'm so opposed to this. And then it's going to spool into a whole discussion about how awful education in America has gotten. But that is a discussion for another day. Thank you all for watching the show. We will be back here on Monday Eastern time, with Monday 5 o'clock Eastern, with another show for you all where we'll have even more things to talk about. I gotta go and cool off now, have a nice cup of ice water, chill out for a second. That was a lot that we just talked about, but I hope you all have a great rest of your week. Have a great weekend. If you missed the show, you got here late, you can go back and watch the show today right now on YouTube, Rumble, on my own X account. You can go back and watch the replay. If you don't want to do that, if you want to wait until tomorrow, we'll be putting out the show again tomorrow evening. I believe we're running the reruns at 8 o'clock. So that seems to be working pretty well. We got about the same amount of viewership both nights. So hopefully we are tapping another audience because of that. But yeah, great show. Glad to be here. I hope you have a great rest of your weekend. I hope you enjoyed the show. If you're not already following me on YouTube, X, Rumble, Instagram, TikTok, I'm at HomoNation, all those different platforms. Follow me there. Send me a message on X. Tell me how great the show is. Let me know if you have any thoughts or comments about it. I post all the time on X. Go and follow me over there. Interact with me in the comments and everything. I love to talk to you all. I love all my viewers so much on the show. Wherever you're coming from, X is the main place I'm at. So hopefully at some point we'll really get serious about posting more on some of these other platforms. But right now I'm just so busy. X is the only place that I really can reliably get on and start having conversations. But yeah, let me know your thoughts. If you have anything you think I need to be talking about, let me know. I'd love to hear from you all. You all are such great people for watching the show. Share this with friends. Let other people know how great the show is, how amazing I am as a host. You guys love me as your host, right, of this show, right? I have the best opinions on the internet. I do. I have the best opinions on the internet. But that's all I have to say. With that, I hope you have a great rest of your week. Have a great weekend. Enjoy the rest of your day. And we will see you back here on Monday. I have been Nathan Hale. This has been Spin Cycle Live. Peace out.